The setting is loud, public, and completely unforgiving. A live promotional event in the early 1970s, packed with reporters, fighters, trainers, and spectators who came expecting spectacle, not subtlety. Muhammad Ali is already the center of gravity in the room, heavyweight champion of the world, Olympic gold medalist, larger than life in every sense. His voice carries effortlessly. His confidence fills the space before he even moves. When Ali speaks, people listen because he has earned the right to be loud. Bruce Lee stands nearby, smaller, quieter, dressed simply, almost blending into the background unless you know exactly who you are looking at. At this point, Bruce is known, but not in the same universe as Ali. Ali is global dominance. Bruce is rising influence. To many in the room, the comparison itself feels absurd. Heavyweight power versus speed, boxing versus martial arts philosophy? The assumptions are immediate and almost unanimous. Size wins. Reach wins. Mass wins. Ali jokes, casually at first, then more pointedly, teasing Bruce about speed meaning nothing when a real punch lands. The crowd laughs. Cameras click. This is entertainment to them, a playful mismatch, a harmless exchange of ego. Bruce does not interrupt. He watches. He listens. He studies. He has spent years in rooms like this, where physical presence is mistaken for understanding. He knows better than to argue. Arguments feed ego. Demonstrations reveal truth. When Bruce finally speaks, his voice is calm, measured, and almost lost beneath the room's noise. He does not challenge Ali's greatness. He does not question boxing. He frames his words carefully, explaining timing, interception, precision, concepts that do not sound impressive to an audience raised on knockouts and highlight reels. Ali smiles, amused rather than offended. He steps closer, towering over Bruce, playful but curious. He jokes that speed cannot stop a heavyweight punch, that no matter how fast Bruce moves, power changes everything. The room leans in, not because they expect a lesson, but because they sense tension. Bruce nods, acknowledging the truth inside the statement. Power does matter, but it is not the whole equation. He explains that precision changes what power can reach. That interception happens before force fully develops. That understanding beats guessing. There is no ring, no gloves, no intention to fight. But there is a moment, brief, deliberate, where Ali agrees to test something small. Not strength, not endurance, just timing. A simple exercise, controlled, safe, witnessed by dozens of people who suddenly realize this is no longer a joke. Bruce positions himself, relaxed, hands loose, eyes focused. Ali raises his arms slightly, still smiling, confident in the inevitability of his advantage. To him, this is harmless curiosity. What follows is not violence, not domination, but something far more unsettling to the assumptions in the room. In a fraction of a second, Bruce demonstrates interception, not striking with force, but arriving first, disrupting motion before it becomes power. The movement is clean, almost invisible to those not watching closely. Ali stops mid-action, surprised. The smile fades, replaced by silence. Not embarrassment, recognition. The room goes quiet because something unexpected has happened. Not a heavy weight being beaten, not a legend diminished, but an idea challenged in real time. That power, no matter how great, is still subject to timing. That size, no matter how imposing, does not negate precision. Bruce steps back immediately, hands open, non-threatening. He has made his point without claiming victory. Ali exhales, nods slowly, and the mood in the room shifts from amusement to respect. Nothing dramatic is announced, no headlines declare a winner, but everyone present understands. They have witnessed a confrontation between two kinds of mastery, one built on overwhelming force, the other on exact understanding. And for the rest of the event, Ali's tone changes. Less joking, more listening. Because for the first time that day, heavyweight power has faced something it cannot simply dismiss. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. There are many more Bruce Lee stories and lessons still waiting to be discovered. What most people in the room failed to understand is that the brief exchange they witnessed was not improvisation. It was the visible surface of two completely different systems colliding for a moment. Muhammad Ali had spent his life refining distance, rhythm, and deception within the strict logic of boxing, gloves, rounds, rules, and a squared stance optimized for punching exchanges. His greatness came from mastering that environment so completely that very few could survive inside it. He was not reckless power. He was controlled violence sharpened by timing, intelligence, and psychological dominance. That is why Bruce never underestimated him. But Bruce Lee was not trying to operate inside boxing structure. His entire philosophy had evolved in reaction to fixed systems. Jeet Kune Do was built on the idea that real confrontation does not respect categories. Bruce had spent years breaking movement down to its smallest functional units: initiation, intention, commitment. He trained himself to respond not to attacks, but to the moment before an attack became inevitable. Where Ali read shoulders and hips to anticipate punches within boxing exchanges, Bruce trained himself to read balance shifts, breath changes, and microtension that existed across all forms of combat. After the brief demonstration, there is a subtle but important change in the interaction. Ali does not retreat, but he also does not push further. Instead, he begins asking questions. Not loud questions meant for the crowd, but quieter ones, directed at Bruce. How fast can you really move? What happens if someone doesn't commit? What if the opponent faints? Bruce answers without theatrics. He explains interception not as a trick, but as a decision, choosing to arrive earlier in the chain of motion, before strength, speed, or mass can fully express themselves. The audience senses that something has shifted. This is no longer entertainment. This is two elite practitioners exchanging information. Ali tests small movements with his hands, not throwing punches, just probing distance. Bruce mirrors without mirroring, staying just outside reach, his posture relaxed but precise. To an untrained eye, nothing dramatic is happening, but to fighters in the room, it is deeply unsettling. They are watching a heavyweight champion, a man who dominates with presence alone, momentarily constrained by timing rather than force. Bruce makes one thing very clear without saying it directly: he is not claiming superiority. He openly acknowledges that if Ali were allowed to operate fully inside boxing, gloves on, space defined, exchanges prolonged, the outcome would favor the heavyweight. But that is exactly the point. Real encounters do not announce their rules. They happen in fragments, seconds, moments of chaos. Bruce's system is designed for those moments. Ali's is designed for sustained domination. Both are valid. Both are dangerous. But they are dangerous in different dimensions. Ali eventually laughs again, but it is not the same laughter from earlier. It is quieter, reflective. He nods, pats Bruce lightly on the shoulder, and says something that few people hear clearly, but several remember later. Speed alone doesn't win, understanding does. Bruce smiles, not because he has one, but because the lesson has landed. That was always his goal. Not to embarrass, not to conquer, to reveal blind spots. When the event resumes and the crowd noise returns, most spectators walk away with a simplified version of what happened. Some say Bruce was fast. Others say Ali wasn't trying. Both are technically true and completely miss the point. The fighters who are paying attention understand something deeper. They witnessed a moment where raw power paused, not because it was challenged physically, but because it was challenged conceptually. That is why this encounter is still talked about decades later, not as a fight that never happened, but as a lesson that did. Two masters briefly overlapping worlds, showing that dominance looks different depending on where you stand. Heavyweight power did not disappear that day, but it learned that speed, when guided by precision, can quietly redraw the boundaries of what is possible. What made this encounter resonate long after the event ended was not what happened in front of the cameras, but what continued off to the side, away from microphones and spectacle. Ali, despite his public persona, was deeply serious about understanding movement. He was not just a puncher. He was a strategist who understood angles, deception, and psychological control. That is why Bruce's explanation lingered. It framed combat not as a contest of attributes, but as a problem of timing and decision-making. Bruce spoke about speed not as quickness of limbs, but as economy, removing wasted motion so that action and reaction collapsed into a single moment. To Ali, this was familiar in principle, but foreign in application. Bruce explained that interception only works if the mind is quiet. If you wait to recognize an attack, you are already late. The body must move before the thought finishes forming. He described training not to react faster, but to perceive earlier. This idea unsettled many listeners because it removed the comfort of preparation. It suggested that mastery did not come from piling techniques on top of each other, but from stripping response down to its most essential function. For fighters raised on drills and repetition within fixed rules, this was deeply challenging. Ali tested the concept mentally rather than physically. He paced, shadowboxed lightly, then paused, imagining how his own feints relied on provoking delayed reactions. He understood immediately where Bruce's danger lay. Not in trading punches, but in refusing to trade at all. Bruce would not meet power with power. He would arrive before the exchange existed. This realization reframed the interaction. Ali was no longer humoring a smaller man. He was measuring a different type of threat, not one that would beat him in boxing, but one that would make boxing irrelevant if circumstances shifted. The fighters and trainers watching absorbed the lesson unevenly. Some dismissed it as theory, others felt something click. They recognized that most fights are decided not by strength or endurance, but by who controls the first irreversible moment. Bruce had built his entire system around owning that moment. Ali had built his career around extending control across rounds. Neither approach negated the other, but the overlap revealed blind spots both ways. By the end of the event, no one claimed victory because there was none to claim. What remained was a quiet respect that replaced the earlier laughter. Bruce left without fanfare, just another participant slipping back into the crowd. Ali stayed, still the center of attention, but with a slightly altered posture, less performative, more thoughtful. The lesson had not embarrassed him. It had sharpened him. Years later, people would exaggerate the story, compressing it into myths and sound bites. Some would say Bruce dropped Ali. Others would say nothing happened at all. Both missed the truth. What happened was subtler and far more important. Two masters crossed paths, and for a brief moment, heavyweight power encountered a philosophy that refused to meet it on familiar ground. That moment of hesitation, that pause, is why the room went quiet. What Bruce took from that encounter was not validation, but confirmation. He had long believed that most people misunderstand speed because they associate it with flash rather than function. Watching Ali, a man whose timing inside boxing was nearly perfect, pause, reassess, and adjust told Bruce that the principle held even at the highest level. If a heavyweight champion built on rhythm and anticipation could momentarily hesitate when faced with interception, then the concept was not theoretical. It was operational. Bruce would later refine this idea further, focusing less on reacting quickly and more on occupying the space where decisions collapse into inevitability. Ali, for his part, absorbed the exchange in his own way. He never spoke publicly about it in detail, and that silence mattered. Ali was not a man who avoided talking. If something was meaningless to him, he dismissed it loudly. If something mattered, he kept it close. Those around him noticed that after encounters like this, Ali became even more invested in feints, rhythm disruption, and psychological timing. Not because Bruce had shown him how to box, but because Bruce had shown him how fragile certainty becomes when the opponent refuses to play inside expected boundaries. Among the trainers and fighters present, the story evolved quietly. It wasn't retold as a challenge or a contest, but as a moment where assumptions failed People who relied on size reconsidered distance. People who relied on speed reconsidered restraint. The encounter didn't create a new hierarchy. It exposed how incomplete hierarchies are when stripped of context. Power dominates within structure. Precision dominates when structure collapses. Most real encounters exist somewhere in between. Bruce would later explain this idea repeatedly, though rarely with reference to Ali. He spoke instead about water, about adaptability, about refusing to harden around a single advantage. Strength becomes predictable. Speed becomes wasteful. Technique becomes rigid. Only awareness survives across situations. That philosophy shaped the final evolution of his training. Fewer repetitions for show, more emphasis on sensitivity, timing, and decision-making under uncertainty. By the time the event faded from memory, its impact had already done its work. It didn't create headlines, but it created adjustments. Fighters don't change because they lose. They change because something interrupts their certainty. That interruption happened quietly, without drama, without humiliation, and without spectacle, just enough to matter. In the years that followed, the encounter took on a strange life of its own. It was never officially recorded, never promoted, never framed as a contest, and that is precisely why it endured. Fighters who were present remembered it not as a demonstration of dominance, but as a moment when certainty fractured. Heavyweight power did not fail. It simply met a form of resistance it was not designed to recognize. Bruce had not tried to outmuscle Ali, outlast him, or embarrass him. He had done something far more disruptive. He had introduced a variable that could not be solved with force alone. Bruce would later articulate this lesson more clearly in his writings and private conversations. He explained that most fighters build their identity around what they do best, and then unconsciously force every situation to fit that strength. Boxers box, wrestlers clinch, strikers trade. When that structure holds, mastery looks absolute. But when structure breaks, when timing shifts, space collapses, or intention is interrupted, identity becomes a liability. Bruce's entire approach was built to survive those fractures. He did not specialize in dominance. He specialized in transition. Ali's greatness too was rooted in transition, but within a defined world. He mastered rhythm, deception, and psychological pressure inside the rules of boxing so completely that he appeared untouchable. What Bruce showed him, briefly, was not a threat to that greatness, but a reminder of its boundaries. There are moments where even the best system pauses, where anticipation meets uncertainty, where the body waits for instruction that never comes. That pause is where Bruce lived. This is why no one who truly understood the exchange ever tried to frame it as, who would win? That question misses the point entirely. Winning depends on conditions. Understanding reshapes conditions. Bruce was not trying to defeat Ali. He was showing that combat is not a single equation, but a moving problem. Ali did not walk away diminished. He walked away sharpened, reminded that even overwhelming power must remain curious to stay alive. For Bruce, the lesson reinforced everything he had been building toward: speed without waste, precision without rigidity, calm without hesitation. The encounter became one more quiet data point in a lifetime spent testing assumptions, not defending them. That is why he never needed to retell the story. The value was not in the telling, it was in the adjustment. Long after the event faded, long after exaggerations blurred the edges, the truth remained simple and intact. Precision faced power, and power listened. Not because it was beaten, but because it recognized something unfamiliar and real. That recognition, that moment when confidence gives way to awareness, is where growth begins. And that, more than any punch or demonstration, is the lesson that endured.